What is up, podheads? Episode 68 of the Podio Slave podcast in your ear holes right now. I am joined, as always, by Anthony and Nate. How you guys doing?
Back from the dead, ready to recoup my nerd card that almost got revoked last episode.
I'm over here dodging all these show announcements. Like, when I think they're done, one flies by my head. I'm like, shit, can't go to that one. That's a school night. Well, there's that one.
Dude, I Manchester Orchestra's playing in our town in October, and it is the third show in October that I bought tickets to, and that's a very busy month for me work-wise, and I'm like, just gonna have to suck it up, man. Gonna have to go to them.
Gonna be a late night and hopefully a late morning.
Yeah, we'll see how that goes. So if you're listening to us, you probably already follow us on the socials. So I'm not going to give you those, although if you want to, just search for us on any of them. You'll find the name. You can find us. If you are a fan, if you have been listening to us for any stretch of time, if you like what we do, you like the people we talk to, tell a friend. Word of mouth is huge. We could use the help there. I think it'd be a lot more fun than throwing, hey, send us an email at you. So yeah, tell a friend and have them check out an episode. Give them your favorite episode and say, hey, check these guys out, because it would be really appreciated on our end if you guys would do that. So go do that. Word of mouth, help us out. Yeah,
plus you sound cooler than recommending like your average Netflix show. You recommend Podio Slave and you're kind of like cool, hip,
In on the ground floor, right?
Yeah, exactly. We're like the meme stock.
Yeah. If you listen to us and like music and you tell a friend, like, it's probably, you're probably not going to tell any friend. You're probably going to target a friend, and chances are they're going to check us out. They're going to like us, and the family gets bigger. So what's not to like?
Yeah, future podheads everywhere.
Hey, maybe we'll see that on a T-shirt someday.
Oh, wait. It may already be on one.
Right.
There's one in existence. My wife made for a friend of ours when they had a baby. So
eBay one of one.
Yeah, one of one.
So, gentlemen, I think we're going to get right into some setlist stuff. What are we going to start with? It was a big show, Madison Square Garden. Who played?
Yeah, so this is about a week since the Foo Fighters played Madison Square Garden 2 nights, right? About a week ago, at Saturday, Sunday, I think. And they had a special guest, which you've all seen by now all over the internet. Dave Chappelle came out to sing Radiohead's Creep with them, which is just, I'm not even sure how to feel about it. And, it's, I watched the video. Obviously, I would have loved to have been there for a number of reasons, but just such a random mishmash of Dave Chappelle with the Foo Fighters. So weird.
Yeah, it is random. Good assessment, too, because I didn't know how I felt. It was like I watched it, and I'm like, this is cool. I mean, is it cool, though? I mean, it's kind of random, and it's not like he's actually singing. He's kind of just like going through the motions in terms of the song. He can't sing. Dave Chappelle can't sing. But to have two goats on stage at the same time named Dave Chappelle and Dave Grohl is kind of cool. I guess it's special for that kind of one-off thing. But other than that, I don't know. It's kind of like, this is cool. Maybe I'll go pee halfway.
My two Daves.
Well, what I was thinking about is like, we all knew he was going to come out on stage because we saw an article that said Dave Chappelle comes out and sings with Foo Fighters. But right. As Nate says, in real time, I wonder if there's any tease of this. Did anyone know he was there? Like, imagine being there and Dave Chappelle walks his ass out and starts singing radio.
Like, the whole thing just sounds like a fever dream, doesn't it?
Right. And like, they must be friends. Like, I don't know.
Well, you said something in the group text earlier, Twan, when we were talking about this. Musicians, especially of the Foo Fighters, stature, have their way to talk to people and can get in touch with whoever, and vice versa. Dave Chappelle at his level can be like, hey Dave Grohl, I want to come out on stage and sing Radiohead. He's gonna be like, okay, sure, come on out, man. So those are the two, like, at that level, that hype, they could probably pull that off. It'd be tougher for a smaller act, obviously a club show act, but pretty random, pretty cool. Dave isn't the greatest singer, so it's like whatever, but at the same time, like, he wanted to go sing in front of 18K or whatever Madison Square Garden holds, so good for him.
Yeah, special guest is a special guest, and now that I think of it, like the last like 3 or 4 Foo Fighters concerts that I've been to, there's been a ton of special guests. So maybe it's just, Dave Grohl's new thing is just bring friends on stage, and like you said, we don't know if they're tight or not, or if Chappelle's just happened to be in the area and got in touch with their management. It's like, hey, I want to do a Radiohead song. It's like, hell, sure, why not? But the last 3 or 4 Foo Fighters shows I've seen, there's been like a roster of special guests between like the birthday party one and just random shows. what was the one? What's the Rick Roll song?
Never gonna give you
Rick
up.
Astley. Yeah, never gonna give you
Rick
up.
Astley. He came out once at a festival gig, and I was just like, "This is
yeah,
rad."
you're right.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be something if this was like the finale of a new Netflix reality show of like, it's like the answer to comedians riding in cars, but it's comedians on stage, and like Dave won the show, so this is the prize. But like we could have seen like
awesome.
Dane Cook come out to When I Come Around or something.
Could have been anybody. Hey, Jay Moore just won a chance to sing I don't even know. Give me Nookie by Limp Bizkit with the Foo Fighters playing it because he won this reality show. Yeah. What kind of fever dream could we come up with here?
Man, Bill Burr, You Ought to Know. I think it's
yeah.
not giving up on You Ought to Know.
Actually, I think Ryan Sinnett called this. You're going to see more of these mishmash collabos coming out of COVID, you know?
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
Yep.
So this could have been a Hard Times headline.
Yeah.
Oh, easily.
There's nothing about this that feels real other than this video of it.
Well, you keep reading and you're like, all right, Dave Chappelle sings with the Foo Fighters and it's Creep? What?
It feels like one of those weird bingos, right? You got Dave Chappelle comes out to Madison Square Garden to sing Creep by Radiohead with the Foo Fighters, not actually Radiohead. And Barstool Sports is one of the first to report on it. None of it makes any sense.
Yeah, it's very clickbaitable for sure.
Man, I'm just trying to transport myself there. And it would have been, if you didn't know he was there, like, you know.
Pretty wild.
What a wild situation.
Is there a crazier one that you guys can think of than that? Like, I don't know, Jason Biggs comes out and sings Scar Tissue from Red Hot Chili Peppers with Metallica. Like, would that be even crazier? Spin the wheel, as Nate says.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that. This is a very good spin the wheel mishmash type thing. Maybe like a game show, like you said, Twan.
Chris Rock comes out with Jesus. You know what? Honestly, I'm getting stuck on the rock band. Like, who are the rock bands still around? You know?
Yeah, right. That's the tough part.
Yeah, Chris Rock comes out to Queens of the Stone Age show and does Longview by
Green Day.
By Green Day.
Chris Rock singing "Bite My Lip and Close My Eyes, Take Me Away to Paradise" would be a little interesting, I think. Oh shit. That's a good one. We don't have to belabor it too much more, but man, that was such a random headline. But we wanted to kind of give you a little spin on it too, because it's been about a week since it happened. So
yeah, super random. And I just bought tickets to the Foo Fighters show out here in Los Angeles today. Scored tickets, so now I'm wondering, who am I going to get for a special guest? It's on the 17th. Pretty stoked for that. It'll be my first arena show since before COVID. Went to a show last week, which was like a little outdoor gig, kind of a small thing in the desert. But this will be my first full on arena show, full capacity and everything. So
I'm jealous of that. That'll be fun.
Yeah, I'm super stoked for it.
I was going to say, it's in LA, so anyone's in play, but everyone's left town.
Yeah,
everyone's moved out of LA.
Mm-hmm. They're all in Texas.
Good one though.
What is our next set list item? We had one more. Metallica, right?
Metallica still finding a way to make news here. What it's been 30 years later? More than that.
Yeah,
35 years later.
Yeah.
So the headline is Metallica announce massive Black Album reissue with 53 special guests with the likes of Elton John, Corey Taylor, Miley Cyrus, Ghost, Weezer, Volbeat, on and on and on and on. I get thoughts. What do you guys got? You guys got thoughts?
I mean, this kind of fits the whole Foo Fighters Dave Chappelle thing. It's like, hey, let's get Miley Cyrus to sing, whatever Metallica song with, Ghost doing the instrumental or whatever, as part of the band. It's kind of a spin the wheel type scenario on that. But I don't know. Metallica is always the punchline's always the same, right? Like how else can we make more money? Really, is it Lars, kind of bring it to the table? Like, we're making good money, but we really should be making more. So we could redo this album and, get every big name in the industry basically and come to the table and redo this whole thing and recoup those royalties.
Yeah. I mean, you echoed my thought. It screams money grab, and I can't help.
Yeah.
I'm going to be the analogy king. I can't help but make an analogy to, an 80s movie director that all these years later just tries to recreate the scenes with modern actors. It's like, well, don't touch that. Like, that was something great. What do you like? I don't know. And it's such a random, like, Flatbush Zombies, hip hop group, Miley Cyrus, Phoebe Bridgers. I mean, they're all talented and good, but I don't know. It just, at the end of the day, I'm not going to listen to these over the originals. I can't imagine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But you'll spin it at least once.
Well, there was a 6-minute teaser, and I'm like, I think I get the gist today.
Right.
Yeah.
See, I think me being a little more casual is more like, all right, this is something I might want to check out. Now, again, I'm not gonna spring for the massive box set and all that stuff, but I'm definitely down to stream it and see what I can glean from it if there's something cool in there. And there's a lot of awesome acts that are kind of around this. So, but it does scream money grab. It screams, how can we breathe new life into old content, old original property or whatever. So I can see that aspect, and I mean, Metallica, if they're anything, they are a money making machine. So it does make sense for them to continue to do this, and it made huge news. I know this is about a week ago that this made news, but it's interesting, and that's why. And it was kind of a slow beginning of the news week last week, so for us to get these two stories and kind of see where they went and kind of think about how we'd handle them on our end, because we're always about the why, right? That's what we do. How did this happen? Why did this happen? And that's what piqued our interest about it. So yeah, it's an I think it's interesting. I'm probably a little more intrigued by it than you guys are, but at the same time, I'm definitely it's probably a money grab.
So I'm gonna real time backpedal a little bit.
Oh yeah,
drink
in real time.
Drink.
Are you doing it in real time?
Yes. So there's the punchline here that I didn't see, which is 100% of the profits will be given to charity.
Oh wow! Well, good. It's
okay.
a money grab for a good cause then.
For a good cause. Yep. So they're going to be split between Metallica's foundation and charities chosen by all 53
Is Metallica's
guests.
foundation Lars?
Right.
I'm just kidding.
Oh man, but that does change things, and it's more of, I mean, you could view this as a fundraiser, and if that's the case, then
That's sick. Yeah, that's a great idea.
it's not lining their own pockets.
No, and I mean, it will get people to go back and listen to the other stuff, the original versions. So there's a little tiny bit of self-serving in there, but totally that makes me feel way better about it. And I mean, there'll be some money spent just because it's for that, and people are Metallica fans and they're completists. So for sure, that makes sense.
Yeah, that brings it more to like a Live Aid type scenario more than just a Metallica. Let's give ourselves props, because originally when you were reading off the names, I was like, well, there's one that sticks out that I'd be stoked to hear, and that's obviously Corey Taylor from Slipknot, Stone Sour fame, and solo. And I started to think, if this was done in a proper nerd fashion, it would be basically all the people that album influenced, and Corey Taylor's one of those guys. So for them to reimagine the song on an album, almost like a tribute, that would make more sense in the lens of true nerdery. But if it's for a fundraiser cause, then I guess that kind of flips that on its head regardless.
Yeah, it's sad but true. But with Metallica, money, nothing else matters.
Pun intended. Wow, 2 puns. Man.
Yeah, there was no Unforgiven joke in there. I couldn't leave that one in.
No, this is a little kind of adjacent to that. You guys saw the Pure Noise lo-fi kind of reimagining of some of their band's songs.
Yeah,
it's pretty dope. The idea is cool, and again, it's kind of breathing new life into something that has already been created by by our friends over at Pure Noise. Kat Nijbadeen, our episode 58 guest, actually. She is the cover. If you look at it, it's an illustration that she made. So go check that out. It's actually really cool. I listened to the Spanish Love Song today and was like, this is, if you're just kind of wanting to chill and throw something on that's not, I mean, that's lo-fi music, right? It's going to be like that. It's going to give you kind of a chill vibe. I love the idea. And I can see more and more record labels and bands are going to do stuff like this. And it fits in with what we talked about last week with that compilation that you brought to the table, Twan. So it's, I'd like to see more of this stuff. It's cool, especially with the streaming world where it's easy to get to.
Yeah, absolutely. I checked out, there were 2 Story So Far songs on there that were really good, and there was a third that I checked out. I was just kind of cherry picking, had no idea what to expect, and it was like great background music for work. Just put the headphones in, and the cover art was cool.
Yeah, that's cool. It's a cool direction for that. I mean, like you said, background music, everyone is still for the most part working from home, that converted from working from an office, and that lo-fi, Spotify, Pandora type stations, I mean, it's almost universal. Everyone's playing that same thing, down to the logo. You always see that same logo: lo-fi beats, chill beats. You know what I mean? So yeah, that's rad.
Yeah, I got to check out more of that because it's, I don't know, it looked like there was over 20 songs on it.
No, I was going to say, it's just such an opportunity now to do these different like creative things, and like kind of reverting to what you were saying on last week's episode, just songs that are kind of hidden, or, you know, secret tracks or B-sides or everything. Like, bring these to the surface, make a full album out of it. There's just so much opportunity to start to monetize these things.
Want to give the fans more.
Yes.
People like us want more always, right?
Mm-hmm.
Without even the artist having to lift a finger. I think this was all there was an artist name in the credits. I'm not sure who it was, but
Mick is the person who threw a lot of these together.
Yeah, it just makes you appreciate the songs. Like, when you strip them down, it's like, wow, these are great songs. Like, sometimes you just get caught up in the way the band performs it, and you know it's good, but when you take it almost out of the context of the band and strip it down and it's still good, it's like, okay, that's a damn good song.
Oh yeah. All right, main segment. I don't know if we have a cool name for the main segment yet, but I think I wrote something down here. Hang on. Revisiting reviews, something like that. Oh, bad reviews revisited, not necessarily, because they may not be bad, but yeah, how about album reviews revisited?
Perfect.
We've got 4 or 5 anyway. We're gonna run through them. We'll talk about the review itself, and then probably kind of just go from there. I don't think we're too structured. It's gonna be more of a like, where were we when this came out? Where are we today? And then why do we think that the review hit or didn't, type of deal. I'm sure there'll be some funny one-liners from some of these reviews. So yeah, I have a couple. I think Twan, you got a couple, and Nate, you got at least one, right? So
yep.
We'll I'll start with one. I got one. You guys ready for this?
Yeah.
Yes.
Do it.
So we talked a little bit about Dave Chappelle singing Radiohead. Might as well jump into some Radiohead.
Hell yeah.
Radiohead's OK Computer. The album came out in 97. And there's a guy who's done a lot of these reviews over the years. His name is Robert Christgau. I'm sure in your research today, Twan, you saw that name a few times too. He named this album the dud of the month in 97, May of 97 when it came out. Yeah. And it's funny because people didn't love Pablo Honey really when it came out. They thought it was kind of like, because Creep was obviously the big song, but the rest of it, they were like, this is good, but they want to be U2, which I've never understood that comparison. Radiohead, I don't think Radiohead has ever really wanted to be U2 other than they came from the UK as well. But that's my opinion, but whatever. At the same time, this is the dud of the month, their third album, right? Because after was the Benz. Yep. The Benz was, I love the Benz. People shit on the Benz too, and I don't get it. I think the Benz is fucking awesome. That might be my favorite Radiohead album. It's probably their most straightforward rock record, and that's probably why I like it the most. But jumping into OK Computer, it's so good. And he essentially calls it, or like brings up Pink Floyd and brings up Wish You Were Here, and is like, why isn't this as good as Wish You Were Here? Which just kind of blows me away. Like, they're not the same band, they're not the same time frame, they're 20 years apart. And it's Wish You Were Here is about Syd Barrett, about one person really, essentially from start to finish. And I love Wish You Were Here, great Pink Floyd record, but this isn't trying to be that. This is something completely different. So I'm not sure where he got that, like why that stuck in his craw. But yeah, he gave it a B-. Said they wouldn't be around for very long, and thought that this is kind of the end point for Radiohead, which obviously we know is not true in the lens of 2021. So I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you think he hit it?
This guy worked for Rolling Stone.
He worked for a bunch of places. He's written for all over. He's got there's a website that was put together about a lot of his stuff too. And he was known for kind of stuff like this. Yeah. But at the same time, I'm like, man, I don't know. I'm looking through it through today's lens. I guess maybe in 97, I'm probably not old enough to realize the trajectory Radiohead is on, because I'm 13. I didn't listen to Pablo Honey until I was much older. I knew of Fake Plastic Trees, but I didn't really know much about them from the Benz or High and Dry. Those songs were huge. And then OK Computer was probably the first one I remember like thinking about, because it was Karma Police was always on MTV, always on the radio. I didn't like that song at first. I love that song now. So going back to 97, 13-year-old me is probably like, nah, not really into this. But obviously that changed over once I got into college. Really, I was like, man, these guys are fucking awesome. What the hell's wrong with me?
Yeah. I mean, in terms of his review, the reason I asked if he worked for Rolling Stone or any kind of major publication is the fact that I almost feel like in the 90s, there was some kind of like weird incentive to write bad reviews just for shock value alone. Mm-hmm. And that because that sells magazines, right? That sells units just to kind of raise some concern or whatnot about something that's getting maybe positive reviews, on a macro level. So there's that. But OK Computer was a huge, change in direction for the band. So, in my lens, I think the way you just described it, Tone, is like I was used to like this rock band, and then OK Computer drops into like this weird electronic thing, and I didn't know what was going on because I was still trying to understand music in general, let alone this band that I was, pretty big into. I wasn't like huge into them like I am now, but to have a band like make a huge right turn like that is always shocking when you're like still trying to figure out music in the first place, and you're like, wait a second, I thought you were like the Bends, and what's this like? You almost like kind of like try to be more professional than you are. Like it's like electronic music's not music, you don't know. You're like 15, 14 years old.
And this is like a hybrid of the Bends and what they ended up putting out after Kid A, right?
Yep.
Kid A is like full on CA guitars. We're out of here, which we talked about on our previous episode last summer or last spring, even about a year ago, because it turned 20 last year. And it's man, they were on their way to that, but this album and they've been touring like crazy. I'm reading Stephen Hyden's book, This Isn't Happening, which is about Kid A, really.
Oh, nice.
But it also jumps into previous and obviously post. So really cool, shout to that book. And I mean, I love this band, so I'm down for all of it.
What's very interesting is, well, you'll find out in a few minutes here, but what's very interesting is the fact that he said dud of the month, but he gave it a B-. I
know, right?
So it's like he's probably, maybe that's just like a clickbait type of headline, or maybe he's just benchmarking against the previous stuff, which I say that almost every episode, but maybe that's what it was. It's like, all right, well, Pablo Honey was fantastic, the Bends, damn, and now this, and he's a little disappointed, and that's the output you get, which is it's the dud of the month, which for me, if something's a dud, it's not getting a B-.
Right.
Yeah.
I did read that on a different one while doing this exercise, that the B- was more like a failing grade because everybody's grades are inflated. He wrote, so one of those funny one-liners that he had. The end of this review, I guarantee that it will not occupy the charts for 10 years. In fact, only because the Brits seized EMI does it have a chance to last through Christmas. That's from, it came out in May. He's saying this will be here today, gone tomorrow by the end of the year. And I mean, as someone who owns the reissue from a couple of years ago on vinyl, I'd say he was wrong.
So I guess just a general theme, and like I read probably dozens of reviews in kind of searching for this episode, and it's just interesting, like the stake that these reviewers are willing to put in the ground, like so polarizing in one direction or the other, where it's like, well, how many times did you actually listen to it? Like maybe a couple times. Like for me, that's not enough for an album to sink in.
Mm-hmm.
But that's their job, so they have to. There's some element of shock value that has to go into it. But
yeah, and time and place, like we were talking about earlier, like they didn't know streaming was going to be around, right? They thought like, oh, like how often are you going to reach for this CD and put it in your Discman? Like,
good point.
Great point.
Maybe very seldom, but now it's like, well, Spotify, if you want to like, pull up a song, you just pull it up. So it's getting, rotation literally every second of every day for that reason alone. So had these guys even fathomed that being a possibility, they would have been like, oh, wait a second. So there's a huge population in Indonesia that loves this album that I never would have anticipated.
That's a great point, because like even Crazy Town's Gift of Game or whatever, it gets millions of spins now just because it's so accessible. That's the first album I could think of that I can't picture anyone reaching for. Sorry.
There's a lot of
Toxic. Toxic's a great song. The opening song on that album's good. That's about it. That's about it.
I love it. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. It became much more easy to get to this. I mean, you can just ask your phone to do it. you just talk out loud and say, hey, so and so, play me whatever, and it will, whether you're sitting in your living room or in your car. So nowadays it's much easier to just grab a record and play it. At the same time, there are people like us that grab the vinyl and want to like open the vinyl up and feel it and put it on. And I mean, but just look at our Instagram page. Like it's a bunch of videos of us putting records on because we love that shit. There's something to be said for that too. But yeah, it was a different world when this came out, and having to grab the CD to put it in, or pay $13.99 to get to it. Yeah, that might be a little more difficult.
Good start. I think I should go next, and you'll find out why here in 2 seconds. The album, Kid A, Radiohead.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So so this is interesting. It kind of opened my eyes a little bit. The review is obviously from the time period, and it was on Pitchfork, which I didn't think was even around back then. But
96, I think, or 95 they started, yeah.
Wow. Yeah, so what grabbed me about this is Pitchfork, I forget who the reviewer was, but he gave this a perfect 10. Perfect 10. And that stood out because obviously if you know Pitchfork, they're super critical. They're notorious for being notoriously critical, one. So to get anything good is an impressive feat. But the fact that this got a 10, it's like, well, damn. So actually, Tone, you set the stage beautifully. Like, if we think about where they were as a band, right? So OK Computer comes out in 97. This drops in 2000. And I just find it interesting that, like, this guy, without having the luxury that we have, which is 20 years removed from 2000, we have 20 years worth of great albums that have come and gone, 20 years to digest Radiohead's catalog. This guy decides to double down on this album in that time period, maybe after 2 or 3 listens. Like, this dude fucking loved this album, and I just think it's amazing that he hit a home run with the review,
Absolutely. It is, again, in reading that book, and I'm like probably a quarter of the way through it. I started it yesterday, and I'm somebody who like needs to read 10 pages and then come back to it, because I don't get bored, but I'm like, my attention isn't always for that. But yesterday I read 55 pages in like an hour, and I was like, all right, I'm all in. Obviously it's a topic I'm into, and here we are talking about it today. So they had just come off a super long, I think they played something like 700 shows from the Pablo Honey to OK Computer time frame.
Wow.
And had trouble writing music for this. So I think they had to just change a lot of things up. Tom York had bought like a record label that had a bunch of this type of music. So he was listening to a lot of that at the time. And that's how you end up with a Radiohead album that really lacked what Radiohead had been to that point. You're right, though, to have somebody be that far ahead of it, because people didn't like it when it came out. And we talked about that when we did this album back last summer, and people really didn't like it because of the way it completely shifted from where they were prior to. And people don't like change, but this is an awesome album. But to have him be on board with it from the jump and be able to be like, yeah, look at my review from 2000. Like, I was in on the ground floor for this record, because today it's widely considered a classic. So good on him.
We'll give him credit here. Brent D. Crescenzo,
nice
contributor
Good job,
for Pitchfork.
Good Irish boy.
Nice. I was thinking this whole time we're talking about this, like, how subjective these reviews really are, though. Like, is this guy, into this type of electronica music beforehand? So for him, it checks that box almost immediately. And then he's a Radiohead fan too. So for him, this is like a dream come true album. And it obviously stands the test of time, but 10 stars, like a perfect album. That's saying a lot. I can't even think of many albums that give like a perfect 10 score. This album included, I think it's great, but a 10 is like perfect. Like, it's flawless, which this is probably near flawless, but I just feel like it's so subjective to like, what are your prereqs? Like, he's probably already into this type of music before, and it's 2000. So electronica music is pretty big at the time, like raves, and that whole scene in 2000 was pretty big. So I wonder if when the guy's not listening to Radiohead, he was into like, Paul Oakenfold and stuff.
Yeah, we'll never know. We know that he loved it. You know what I mean? And yeah, it just, so this is actually going to be the second time we bring up Barstool Sports on this episode, but Dave Portnoy, the pizza reviews, he's stingy on the reviews because he says, hey, if I give out a 10, that means nothing ever, ever, ever can be better than it. Yeah. So that's kind of what this guy is saying, is nothing can be better than it. I'll read a couple excerpts from the review here. He starts it by saying, I had never even seen a shooting star before. So, I mean, that shows you he's super high. Like, he finally saw a shooting star. But I think this is a pretty good one here. He says, it will cleanse, talking about the album, it will cleanse your brain of those little crustaceans of worries and inferior albums clinging inside the fold of your gray matter. So, like, it's just, I don't know, it put me in another world. Like, damn, this dude, like, I was trying to think of, like, the last time I was that blown away by an album, and I can't think of one.
I'm in the same boat as Dave Portnoy. Like, it's hard to give anything a 10. I love a lot of stuff, but I like enough different music, too, to be like, I need to be in the mood for that, so it can't be a 10, because a 10 you want to put on and never listen to anything else, right?
Yeah.
So that the gray matter line is so Pitchfork, too.
Well,
like, I want to shit on it, and we've talked about how we have a little bit of a love-hate with Pitchfork. Sometimes it's great, sometimes it's up its own ass, and I think this is one of those situations.
Well, he says in the article, breathing people made this record.
Wow.
Yeah, not robots.
But again, we have the luxury of time here, and like, we know it's great because we've had 20 years to digest it and compare it to all the other trash that's come out and good albums that have come out since then. Not just Radiohead, but the fact that he saw this in the moment, it's pretty cool, and it just makes this episode fun. Like, just to see
and
this.
Then Amnesiac they wrote Amnesiac around the same time. That came out a year later, and that wasn't as good, but still good. And then In Rainbows was 6 years after that, and that album's widely considered one of their best too. Mm-hmm. And then they put out King of Limbs, which is very electronic and nobody likes. So you can go any which way with this version of Radiohead. But yeah, that's a good one. And to hear somebody be ahead of the curve, because I mean, when I was doing research for this, I was looking for ones that were wrong.
Right.
And to find one that was like, yeah, man, I love this. This is great. And for them to be vindicated all these years later, good for them.
Man, this segment really proves how great Radiohead is, because believe it or not, I chose Radiohead as well.
No way.
No.
Yeah, this is very bizarre. The Bends for me in 95, 3.5 stars. And the first line on this review is, Radiohead's reach may fall short with the Bends, a sonically ambitious album that offers no easy hits. That couldn't be further from the truth.
Yeah, right?
I mean, it's like their staple album. But like we were talking about earlier, you got to like transport yourself to 1995 and be like, you know, where does it stack up against other albums and the music scene in that time frame? And it's really hard to transport yourself back and almost be removed from, like you said, Twan, like what we know now, and just like our growing up and our kind of education in the music industry is completely different than, you know, anyone working for a music publication. You almost have to write bad reviews to be credible.
What this tells me is that, like, is there any other band that's under a tighter microscope?
Yeah,
there aren't many. Yeah, there aren't many.
I mean, Radiohead is a band across the board that you kind of either love or hate, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say that. Yep. I remember when I was starting to get into them, I downloaded a bunch of stuff. This is in the age of when you could do that. I've since paid for all of it, as we've talked about before. But I was in college and I had nothing but time, and I would listen to them, and sometimes I'd be like, man, this is awesome. And sometimes I'd be like, man, I have no fucking clue what's going on here. And I want to know, like, can someone let me in the club, man? Like, I want to know what's happening here. And I think I coined, talking to friends about it, like, Radiohead makes music that is supposed to not be able to be gotten. Like, you're not supposed to get it. Right. And around that time, I think they did. Around the, early 2000s to mid 2000s, they did. In the mid 90s, they were a rock band. And The Bends is a rock album. And I love The Bends. And I love when I first listened to it, and again, I was probably in college when I did, but when I first listened to it, I loved it. And you're right, Nate. High and Dry and Fake Plastic Trees.
Massive.
Come on. Those are fucking huge hits. They were used everywhere. And I mentioned this a little earlier. The comparison to U2, I don't hear it or see it. I don't know if you guys do. I don't think other than where they're from, I don't feel or hear or see that at all.
I've never even heard that comparison.
Yeah, around this time, which is weird.
Have you heard that, Nate?
I've heard that comparison, but I've heard more comparisons with Radiohead and Coldplay. You know, Coldplay kind of being a ripoff of Radiohead, right? There's even some good memes about that. But I think the only comparison to U2 and Radiohead is really just their stature and how the music, you know, completely captivates you. Other than that, no, there's no like similarities in terms of like music composition, I'd say. But
yeah, U2 wrote songs to be huge. Radiohead did not, and they became huge. I mean, I guess those are the similarities.
Yeah, no, it's a good way to frame it for sure. No, you're right about the Radiohead being very polarizing, and you either love it or hate it. Because the people that have told me that they don't like it, they're like, "Oh, it's just so depressing. It's so emotionally drowning." I'm like, that's actually part of what makes it amazing. You know, Tom York, his voice is very unique, and the instrumentals that surround that voice and that, you know, song progression are very emotional. So, but that's what makes it stand alone. So,
when was the review written? Do you know?
95.
Yeah, 95.
Well, because the album came out March 13th, 95. Because the reason I asked that is, if the review came out shortly after that, then you wouldn't have known Fake Plastic Trees would have been huge.
Yeah, right.
But do you guys, I mean, obviously, I know the answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Do you guys ever listen to albums for the first time and think, that's going to be a single, that's going to be a single?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, yep.
I'm trying to think if, clearly this guy did that and didn't think these would be singles, but like, I'm wondering if I listened to this with fresh ears in 95, if I could have picked it out.
Well, I think
the world would never know.
Didn't they lead with it might have been My Iron Lung, which is, I like that song, but I'm not sure it's a single compared to High and Dry or, you know, some of the other songs on the record. So yeah, that's a good way to do it. I'm kind of excited to go back and listen to all of these with, I've never heard this before, pretend you've never heard this before, and see if you would like it the first time.
Tough, yeah.
It's going to be hard to do. No, it's absolutely hard to do, but I think I'm going to try.
It's a hard exercise. The review was on May 18th, 1995, so I'm not sure when the album dropped. Yeah, so he knew.
Well, he would have known High and Dry for sure. Fake Plastic Trees was right around that time period. So, yeah, I don't know. He just wasn't feeling it, but he gave it a 3.5, which isn't bad.
Yeah, it's like the B- though, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I think this album's at least a 4 or maybe a 4.25 out of a 5. You know what I mean? I think it's higher up.
And the other thing is, like, we don't know, kind of Nate, to your point with, you know, if the guy liked Paul Oakenfold for the Kid A review, like I don't know anything about these reviewers. Like, are they metalheads? Are they pop heads? You know, what's their thing? But I love the quotes. Dud of an album, shooting star.
Oh yeah.
No singles.
Looking at this from our perspective, because now we've been doing this for a little while, and we've put a lot of takes out there into the world on the record. We haven't done a ton of shitting on things. I think the handful of times we've reviewed anything, it's been something we've liked, and I think if we haven't liked it, we've steered clear. So like, there is a little like bravery with going out there and saying, I'm going to review this and give you an honest take, even if I don't like it, and putting that on the record, because the idiots like us 20 years later could be putting it out there and making fun of it and whatever, you know. So
Tickets to My Downfall was in Nate's top 5. Oh my God, that didn't age well.
You make pop punk now. Travis Barker to rappers, you make pop punk now.
Well, the cool thing that we do is we, you know, may have shelved an album, but we actually revisit it. So that is the luxury we have, is we can revisit it and, you know, record our reactions after the fact, like Curl Left of the Murder. Like you guys, or Twan, you said you revisited that album after kind of dismissing it for a little bit, right?
Yeah.
So we kind of have that luxury, I think. And another thing I was thinking about too, like with these guys that review these albums, like back in the 90s, they were getting advanced copies of these records in the first place. So they had like a, you know, almost like a sneak peek going to a movie premiere kind of thing. They get the first listen. And then secondly, the kind of the other side of this is, if you write a good review, let's say that 10-star review, how much of that, because this is very prevalent in the 90s, how much of that is payola, you know?
Yeah.
It's such a good point, because you, on both fronts, because with the advanced screening, you have no idea what the public's going to think. So you are kind of going out on a limb, unless there's financial influence or you're friends with the label and things like that. And that's the thing, is a lot of these music critics, I'm sure, have relationships, but yeah, either way, they are that is interesting tone. Like the idea that you could be called up on your bullshit years later, which kind of what we're doing here.
Yeah, I mean, yes and no. I think we're handling it as well as we can because we've had the luxury of time. We've had the luxury of the world giving their opinion on it 10 years out, 5 years out, whatever, instead of 3 weeks. You got to listen to this twice, and then I need you to write that up because it needs to be in the next month's publication. That's hard. That's really hard, especially when you can't walk it back until the following month, maybe it's publication or something like that. And it lives forever on the internet, which people didn't know when they were writing in 1995 that was going to happen either. So, kudos to them for having the balls to do what they did.
Yeah, it's just such a specific time for everything. And like in the 90s was when you chose one genre of music that you were a fan of, right? So this is another thing. Like you can't review this, deathcore album a 10 out of 10 stars because you're not a fan of that music. You're a rock guy or you're a country guy. Like it was so like divided back then. Now it's like very much so on this podcast. Like we like all genres of music, so we can like be very equal opportunity. But back then, I feel like it was very much like, no, you write, like you're the grunge writer, so you're going to be in that category.
There was a lot of
Rolling
that,
Stone,
yeah.
So, man, Radiohead deep dive.
I was going to say, is this the Radiohead review revisited alliteration episode?
Yes, that, and I think the new episode, they're not podheads anymore, they're Radioheads. We're the Radiohead podcast, so let's change it up. I got another one. You guys ready?
I'm
yeah,
ready.
Let's do it. Tom York?
It's not Tom York. No, it's not. But it is electronic music, which is interesting. And it's also Pitchfork. Say again, Nate?
Atoms for Peace?
No, dude, it's not. We're done with Radiohead. Stop saying Radiohead stuff. No, it's Daft Punk's Discovery.
Nice.
Which came out in 2001, and Pitchfork gave it a 6.4. And the beginning of their review is literally, one more time, we're going to celebrate. Oh, yeah. All right. Don't stop the dancing. And it's written out no less than 15 times. That's the beginning of the review, which is, I think, Pitchfork for, we don't like this very much.
Right.
It's repetitive, so we're going to make fun of it. Yeah. It's very Pitchforkian. So, yeah, they didn't really love Daft Punk Discovery. This is the second Daft Punk record, right? It came out after Homework from 97. 4 years prior. Homework is a little more electronic, a little more like, not electronic. This is probably a little more electronic than that, but Homework's a little more like underground DJ stuff, which it's probably my least favorite Daft Punk record. There's some great stuff on there, and it translates live better than it did on CD. This one is, I mean, it's an homage to disco, and I don't think Pitchfork understood that in the moment, so they shit on it. But the name Discovery is very disco if you flip it around. There's a song on there called Veridis Quo, which is also very disco. Like, it's just, I don't think they got the joke. I don't think they understood what they were trying to do. And I mean, One More Time is a song, a massive Daft Punk song that everybody knows from a million different reasons. But yeah, they were out. They were out on it and gave it a 6.4. And prog and disco have never openly begged for their own hybrid, but the genre's newborn Frankenbaby is alive, whether we like it or not. Is that not Pitchfork?
Oh, that is verbatim Pitchfork.
Yeah. So, yeah, you can tell they were not super fans. But, I mean, again, through the lens of only having heard it a couple times.
So I'm going to kind of transport myself back to that time frame. So this was my introduction to them. I think like most people, right?
Yep.
So I'm wondering if, I don't know, like I actually don't know, like how big were they with the Homework album?
I don't think they were huge. I think this is what put them on the map.
Yeah, so like from that lens of like this, it's a duo, right?
Yep.
Yeah, this duo coming out from France. I think they're from France. And
they're French, yep.
Yeah, in this kind of different sound. And even if they did know that first album, it may have been a departure. But not knowing how it would take, like, I'm trying to think if I heard this, you got to know One More Time's a banger, though, right? Why would you shit on that? Yeah, it's like I'm like having a struggle in my head of how you could come to this conclusion, even if you don't necessarily like this type of music.
So was Harder, Better, Faster, Stronger, which Kanye ended up sampling and turning into even more of a banger down a couple of years later. Like,
yeah,
You had to know.
Twan, when you said like, how can you not like that? I was thinking of like people when you say thank you and you expect like a thank you, but there's silence. You're like, that takes effort to not say thank you.
Right.
Yeah.
You put more effort into not saying it than I did to say it.
Yeah. Did they backpedal on this, Tone?
I'm sure they have since. Yeah, I'd actually have to look it up, but I'm almost positive they've ranked it very high since in the time that's passed. Another funny line from the from the review, as on Digital Love, which is one of the songs, and Something About Us, which is another one of the songs on the album. The sentimental love songs come off with all the heart-melting earnestness of Kid Rock's Only God Knows Why. So they are likening this to Kid Rock's Only God Knows Why.
Oh, man.
God.
I would say the reviewer did not like this one very much.
Man.
Yeah, that would be a revoking of the nerd card. Easy. The Kid Rock comparison is really awful, unfortunately.
And that's actually not a bad Kid Rock song.
And again, we're going to say it a million times this episode. The context of time is so important. Kid Rock was...
Yeah.
Again, this what I'm going to say doesn't even age well, but he was in the mix with Korn and Limp Bizkit. And I know...
He was. Yep. Absolutely.
You know
what
I mean?
Huge. Huge, especially around this time.
Massive. Absolutely massive. And like, he played Woodstock, right, Nate? Did he play?
Yep.
Yeah. Probably main stage. I mean, he was top of the world. So, you know, I know they were shitting on them for that in the review, but like, he was on top of the world. I mean, we all lived through it. He was. Love it or hate it, he was.
He was massive. And today you read headlines about Kid Rock where Kid Rock uses homophobic slur during his apology for using homophobic slur. How the mighty have fallen.
Yeah. Kid Rock's the new former child actor headline.
Pretty much, yeah.
Pretty cool.
That's not a bad way to put it. I mean, he was an adult when he got big, but he really was basically a kid.
All right, we ready for round 2 for me?
Yep.
Yeah.
So when we were kind of throwing out ideas for this segment, I actually sent you guys a screenshot of this review, so I'm going to roll with it. The album is Nirvana's Nevermind, and it's a Rolling Stone review that came out in the time period. So 1991. It was from Ira Robbins. He gave Nevermind 3 out of 5 star review. Now, we just talked about in current day, we have the ability to revisit things. You know, we can put out in next week's episode, we could backpedal on something. Well, that's kind of what Rolling Stone did. They gave this a second take in 2004 and gave it 5 stars. So it's interesting. What kind of the similar themes that we've talked about, which is just like, and I don't know the answer, and maybe you guys do know because you've researched Nirvana more than I have, but like in 91, when this album came out, like they had put out Bleach in 1989. They're on Sub Pop, so pretty well known, at least by current standards. I don't know if that was well known back then.
It was, at least regionally, it was for sure.
Yeah, so like somewhat well known, but how well known? Like obviously Nevermind, like how big was Nirvana pre-Nevermind? I have no idea. Do you guys know?
I think they were going through the motions, like all that scene in Seattle. I think they were, club shows. From people that I know that lived in the scene, they said it was very like, kind of like us in Maine, like seeing shows at the Asylum, like Rustic Overtones, they're playing again, sweet, let's go check it out. That kind of thing, which is insane to think about.
I think they were a little bigger than that because it's Seattle versus Portland, Maine. But yeah, I read Everybody Loves Our Town, which was
Mark Arm from
the oral history. I read the oral history of Seattle grunge, that stuff, and Mother Love Bone was huge early. Green River was kind of big. Everybody thought Soundgarden was going to be the one to make it. Obviously, they did. And Nirvana and Pearl Jam. Once Pearl Jam kind of started to happen too. Once Andy Wood passed away. So, but yeah, they weren't as massive as obviously we know them as today.
Right.
But they were on their way to becoming somewhat of a powerhouse. They just hadn't gotten there pre Nevermind, and I think Nevermind drops. Obviously, we get what we get from them, and they turn into what they turn into. And looking at it today, you're like, how could anybody give Nevermind a 3 out of 5? But in the moment, you're like, they just put out kind of a punk record, right? Bleach is a little more punky, a little more less accessible than Nevermind probably was, especially for the change in music, because the late 80s into the early 90s is a completely different world for music, right? We're talking Guns N' Roses, we're talking, hair metal, jumping into grunge. which kind of took its lunch and said, you guys are done. See you later. Get off the playground. Like, this is ours now.
Tone, perfect segue, because this is perfect, because I wanted to quote a little excerpt from the review, which is, it's this: Nevermind finds Nirvana at the crossroads, scrappy garageland warriors setting their sights on a land of giants. And that's dead on. Like, if you knew a band from being a, kind of a regional sweetheart and underground scene on Sub Pop, and this comes out, like, I can see why you might not go gaga like 2020, like we do in 2021 for this album. That's why, like, other than the 3 out of 5, if you read the article, it's relatively positive. It's just speculating. All right, where do you go from here? You know what I mean? Because you kind of can't go back to the garage band stuff, because everyone will think, well, you sold out and now you're coming back. It's just an interesting. Man, it would have been so cool to be from that. We've talked about this with Lance Mercer, like from that region in that time, and see the explosion, and it just took off. And this guy, poor Ira, doesn't have 2020 lens.
No.
2021 lens.
Go back and listen to our conversation with Lance. We had him on episode 13 very early. He is awesome. He was awesome. That was when we found our interviewing shops too, I think. You guys will like that one. On top of the fact that, I mean, we ride for this area and the music from that area growing up. We listened to a lot of it, and we're really, really down with it. But yeah, go check that one out.
I was thinking, Antoine, when you were saying the 3 out of 5 in that era, going from Bleach to Nevermind, it reminded me of Behind the Music with Green Day when they signed for Dookie with Reprise Records, is it? And how much, backlash they were getting to essentially sell out and move to a major. But it was either like move to a major or continue doing what we're doing and eventually maybe get there. But eventually you have to make that, make that transition if you really want to make it a career. So I think this was a Nirvana thing. And the grunge scene was very much like, do you really need to go mainstream? Sub Pop is going to be able to do it for you. So I wonder if this guy, the guy that reviewed this, was in the scene and was kind of jaded just on that alone. Like, oh, you know what? Like, they don't need to go full major, but they did. And because of that, they're going to get 3, not 4, whatever, 5.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think the other piece is it's just so different than what had been dominating at the time.
Yeah.
There is obviously the punk world had been going for pretty solid 10 years, right? 10, 12 years of punk music as a backlash to disco into the 80s. And that kind of scene was a thing, and they kind of started there, but grunge wasn't grunge. We didn't know what grunge was in 91 when this dropped, for the most part.
Great point.
I mean, there were a couple of people, there were people in the area that knew, but nationally, internationally, it was not the same as what we today know as grunge. So to be looking at it through the lens of, all right, it's all GNR and Whitesnake and whatever, and yeah, there's this underbelly of punk that is a little more, DIY, a little not darker, but like in its own world compared to the glam of 80s
grittier
hair metal. Yeah. A little more real, I would even say, than the glam of 80s hair metal. This, looking at it through that lens, this album maybe doesn't hit home, right?
Yeah. It's hard music to market too, when you kind of transport to that time frame, like grunge music as we know it today. Like, the lyrics are pretty dark, and the whole look and aesthetic of that scene was very much like, how did this even ever become mainstream? Holy shit, like Nirvana, Kurt Cobain, all slouched over, everyone's wearing ripped clothes, and you watch a scene out of the movie Singles that really transport you. I think it's Cameron Crowe that directed that movie.
Yep.
Just throws you right into the mix. You're like, damn, this really was like grassroots. This is really neat. Like you said, listen to that interview with Lance Mercer, and he'll explain the whole thing. But yeah.
I'm just kind of struggling because, like, the music speaks for itself, but like in that time frame, how would you even describe this? It's like, all right, you like the Replacements, okay, you like the Pixies, you like Sonic Youth, okay, well, you might like this. Well, it's really not like that, but it's kind of the closest adjacent thing that's well known at the time.
Yep.
It shouldn't have worked, but it did.
Well, the world wanted to change from the 80s hair metal. There's only so many of those songs. I mean, and I love them, especially looking back on them now. If I were living in it, I'd be a little less down with that. But you know what I mean? Like, there's only so much that you could do. It can't last forever. You need to change. Something different needs to happen. I mean, grunge grunge had a shorter probably time frame. They went from late 80s, 89 to what? Probably 94-ish, 95-ish, and then new metal started to take over.
Yeah.
And some hip hop stuff too. So it's all, when you're the first or one of the first, like they were, to kind of usher in a new generation, looking at it in the moment, you're probably like, man, what is this garbage? But looking at it after the fact, you're like, wow, they were awesome and way out in front of it.
So here's another one that I pulled up just because it's so iconic. Led Zeppelin, the album Led Zeppelin, self-titled. I'm going to keep this one simple. They didn't do a star system back in the 60s, I guess, late 60s. So they just said unfavorable, which is extremely hard to comprehend now, as we know Led Zeppelin, again, in a 2021 lens. But to think of it back then in 1969, to be like, this is pretty unfavorable, just blows my mind.
Yeah, you're talking about the first record, Led Zeppelin 1, right? Dropped in 1969.
Yep.
So I think this one suffers from a similar fate to Nirvana's Nevermind.
Yeah.
I think there was a lot of peace and free love and hippie stuff from the 60s, and we're now at the end of the 60s, and now we're a little more of an edge, a little more of a blues kind of based, hard rock, as Led Zeppelin ended up being. And I mean, they stole from the blues world wholesale with a lot of their early stuff. So I think this was different. I think it was different for what the world was hearing and seeing. And I think I read this review today too, Nate, just in passing and doing this, and saw they kind of liked what Jimmy Page had done with the Yardbirds prior and thought that he was better there and was a good blues guitarist, but wasn't great. And I mean, fucking Jimmy Page we're talking about. Like, yeah, he's not that good. Like, he was better with his other band. Like, funny to read those words, obviously, as far out as we are today, 50 some odd years later. But man, like, to not think Led Zeppelin's good just because it's different is crazy to me.
It makes me think of, so in 69, like, what even publications were out? So, I don't think there was probably a feeding frenzy to, like, be as shock value as there is today, because, like, that's how you stand out today. Back then, like,
totally,
this dude really thought that. Like, he was doubling down on what he actually thought. And the other thing is, I mean, who's big for rock bands in that era? So Pink Floyd was around, right?
Yep.
Beatles, Stones.
Yep.
So I don't know. This could have been
Cream.
Yep. So you probably had someone who was just partial to maybe some of those other bands or a different sound in general. But again, context of time. No one had heard of these dudes. You know what I mean? It's like, does this album, and I'm not as familiar with this album, does this album sound like anything at that time?
Mainstream, no.
I was going to say, I can't think of it.
This guy wasn't ready for it then. He just wasn't.
Mainstream, no. I mean, there's obviously some bits and pieces, but like they kind of took from the blues world and then put a, charismatic frontman in front of it all and had a great rhythm section in John Bonham and John Paul Jones. So I know The Who was also around at this time, and The Who, they were the ones that coined Led Zeppelin. Like, hearing them said they're going to go over like a Led Zeppelin, like the lead balloon, and it wasn't going to work, the Hindenburg type deal. So that's how we ended up with the name. But yeah, there wasn't a ton like what they were doing at the time, and I think they had a similar kind of fate as what Nirvana was doing in the early 90s. Good pull, Nate.
Was the eccentric frontman a thing? I mean, Stones.
Probably minimally compared to what we see today.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Robert Plant was different in that regard, a little bit more flamboyant than what was kind of going on. I mean, Mick Jagger being like the big exception, obviously, kind of in the same era. Yeah, I don't know. And it kind of similar to that whole grunge thing we were just talking about, like with Jimmy Page coming from the Yardbirds, there might have been some disconnect there. Like maybe this guy was a big fan of the Yardbirds, and he's like, he sees this as like, oh, they broke up the Yardbirds and now this guy's in this new band and it was actually better in the old band, and now this new thing's whatever, unfavorable, I don't care for it, and it's fucking Led Zeppelin.
Right. Things that haven't aged well for 200, Alex.
I'm out of them. I get no more, guys.
I think that's a good spot to wrap. Last week we went for an hour and almost 2 hours before we figured out we should probably stop. So this will make for a good listen for everybody.
The Radiohead episode.
The first half is Radiohead.
Primarily Radiohead.
And we almost did them in sequence too. Almost did him.
Yeah.
Nate, you screwed up the sequence.
Cool. So if you like what you hear, tell a friend, please. Tell friends, tell a couple friends, tell a brother, tell a sister, tell a mom, tell a dad, tell your kids. Do what you got to do. Make the Podhead Nation grow. We want a few more people checking us out and telling all their friends that they're in on the ground floor with a Podio Slave. So yeah, check us out anywhere you can find us on any of the social medias. Just type in Podio Slave and we're there. Check us out on YouTube. Check us out on TikTok. We've got content flying at you every day of the week.
Yeah, and if you're listening and you wrote this unfavorable review for Led Zeppelin, please get in touch.
He's probably not with us anymore. Rest in peace.
And actually, that's a call out. If you wrote any of the articles, any of the reviews that we talked about, we want you on the pod. We'll chat about it. You can tell us what you were thinking about in the time.
I know. I would love to hear that, actually.
Yeah.
That's a good call. Yeah. So if you catch wind that we were shitting on you on a podcast, we actually want to know what you were thinking in the moment. So yeah, hit us up, Podcast at gmail.com.
What were you thinking? Literally, what were you thinking?
Thanks, everyone.
Awesome.
We'll see you next week.
Awesome. Cheers, everyone.
Peace, Podheads.